So on this particular demonstration, what I'm going to be doing is working into my silhouetted area on the San Giorgio Sunset painting by Claude Monet. Now, once again, I know I keep showing you, but it's very important to remember to have your reference image in front of you while you are working, especially when you are working on a reproduction, because your goal is to make your painting look as much like the original as possible. And you can't really do that if you're not looking at the original. So what I'm going to do is kind of start in here with a bit of a black, but if you look closely at the painting, you will see that there's a lot more colors in there than just black. The reason I'm starting with black is so that I can go ahead and get a nice dark base coat into that area. But then I'm going to be putting basically all of the colors of the painting into this particular spot. So what I'm going to do right now is focus primarily on the bulk of that silhouette. I'm not going to do the exact edges with this brush because this brush is a bit too big, but it is a good brush for kind of filling in just like the bulk of all of that. I just would not want to do any detail with this large of a brush on this size painting. So again, just kind of working on getting a nice dark base coat. It's not going to be solid black because remember when you mix black with the water, it does tend to make gray, because the best way to lighten any sort of watercolor painting is to add water. So here I'm going to actually flip my painting so that I can be using the tip of my brush here along the edge of the water. And I'm not going to go too far into the water yet. There definitely are some darker places that do go into the water, but I'm going to focus primarily on what is connected and touching the silhouette portion at this point. Still just working with my black, still just trying to get a nice dark base coat in there, but knowing that it's not going to only be black. There's lots and lots of colors, lots of purples, lots of blues and reds, because basically what's happening is everything in the sky and in the water is sort of being absorbed almost by that silhouette. So I'm going to start with a little bit of blue down here now, directly into that black that is still wet. Once again, looking at my actual image that I'm working from more than I am looking at my painting, because it's very important to make sure that we get the colors in the right spots. And I'm still using my larger brush because I'm still just kind of filling in general details on that silhouette. Once I work more on the edges and the specific lines, that is when I will go to a smaller brush. I'm going to put some red in here now. Put a little bit of orange too. So all of these colors are going to kind of make a brownish color when you do mix them. But essentially what we're doing is just kind of putting the colors that we see, and then we will go back in with more detail, smaller brushes, and be a little more specific about color placement. Because right now the idea is just to get a nice dark sort of base coat. Typically we would not want to start this dark on any part of the painting, but because this is a silhouette style, it's a little bit different than the traditional procedure. There's a bit of blue back up here towards the top of the sky area, which makes sense. And then this sort of just kind of fades into a grayish area as it goes towards that other side. So we're just going to kind of do like that for now. Then I am going to go ahead and use a smaller brush. Not a teeny tiny brush at this point, but definitely one that is smaller. I'm going to get some black on there first. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of go along the edges and actually turn the page so that I can be using sort of the edges as a guideline here, the edge of my brush. And just using just enough water to extend that color out so that I do kind of fill in the rest of that silhouette outline. And there are certain areas where it just looks almost like there's a brush stroke if you look closely at the original painting. So what I'm going to do is actually use my brush to sort of recreate that sort of brush stroke idea, especially sort of on the sides where it looks almost like it could be a turret. And remember, I can still see my pencil lines from where I drew, so that's actually very helpful at this point. And again, I'm just using enough water and pigment to sort of spread the color I already have. I'm not too worried about changing any of the color at this point. I'm more focused on just filling in the rest of that silhouette. And there are some areas along this edge here where there's some bright yellow. So I do want to make sure that I pay attention to that so that I can eventually go back in and add those nice bright yellows. For now, I'm just going to put some of it in there, primarily just to remind myself that it is there and to go ahead and start getting that silhouette looking as accurate as I can. Because as long as I put colors on there while the base is still a little wet, then things are going to blend together much more effectively and look more like my original. Because on the original, it looks like it was all done while the whole thing was wet. So we want to sort of recreate that idea as much as possible, which is a bit of a challenge, but it's well worth it. So here I'm just using a little red. So using a bit of the color that I have in the background and some of the color that I have in the silhouette so that I can create that sort of blended look. Then there's some blue right